Hi, everyone. This is the 20th episode of this season of the podcast. And I wanted to take advantage of this episode to kind of recap and just take this episode as an opportunity to summarize the main points that I've been talking about up until now. So, when I started this new season of the podcast, I started with a big question, which is what is the spiritual meaning of parenting? I also wanted to understand the bigger picture of parenting because what I started to feel is that we are focusing our attention into something that is very, very narrow, which is our day-to-day interactions with our children. And I'm not saying that that's not important. It's very important. But when we focus only on those day-to-day interactions, we kind of miss the bigger picture of parenting. So a few things that I've been arguing throughout this season is that many people think that we are facing a mental health crisis because our children are suffering from high levels of anxiety and depression. Teenagers have a hard time to take responsibility. Young adults are not launching into the world, but staying in their parents' houses and basements and are dependent on their parents, are not trying new things, are not taking responsibility for their life. But what I argue throughout the season is that our children are not facing a mental health crisis, but actually a meaning crisis. And because of that, I feel like we need to focus on the deeper meaning behind parenting because we want to try to help our kids gain back that meaning in their lives. A few points that I talked about throughout this season is that kids need a sense of belonging to something bigger than themselves. So something bigger than themselves can be a bigger goal, can be a family value, can be a religion, can be something that is spiritual, something that takes them outside of themselves, that they feel like they are part of something. Also, I argue that kids don't need to be the center of the family, but we have to look at our children as part of a whole, as part of the family. And I said that it's actually not good for our kids to feel like they are a center of the family because we don't want them to be self-centered. We don't want them to focus their attention on themselves, but actually we want them to focus their attention on what they can do for others and how they can be givers and of service to other people. I also talked about the fact that kids are anti-fragile. We have started to think in our society that kids are fragile and we need to protect them from harm and from challenge and from adversity and from trauma. But actually, kids are not fragile and they thrive from challenge and adversity. I talked about the fact that kids need much more responsibilities around the house. It gives them a sense of accomplishment and independence and meaning that they so need. I also talked about the fact that we need to integrate more family rituals in order to embody our family values. So that can be weekly meals that you do together or different celebrations that you celebrate throughout the year or different rituals that you have for birthdays or for holidays, things that are repetitive, things that come every week, things that come every month or every year. And that gives our children that sense of what our family values are and also gives them that sense of belonging. One of the other things that I talked about is that because in our society we lack a clear moral framework, then we need to give that moral framework inside the house. We need to be the ones who teach our children right from wrong. We don't want to leave that to social media or to their peers, because then we don't know what their value system is going to be and what their morals are going to be like. So we want to take that upon ourselves as parents. I talked about the fact that parental authority is crucial, and we need to be the ones who lead our children as benevolent leaders who have a clear goal in mind for them, for our family, and for ourselves. I also talked about the fact that feelings cannot be our guides. We should acknowledge our feelings. We shouldn't suppress them. We always have to question them and help our kids overcome those feelings and not be led by those feelings and not let the feelings decide our decisions in our parenting. And that's part of our parental authority. If you want to dive deeper in these ideas, there are a few solo episodes that I recorded throughout this season The first solo episode is called How to Raise Kids to Find Meaning in a World That Lost Its Moral Compass. And in this episode, I dived into the mental health issues that we are facing as a society. And I argued that this is not a mental health issue, but actually a meaning crisis. And I gave 3 solutions for this meaning crisis. One of them was to give our children the freedom to choose their purpose and hold them accountable for it. The second one is to reclaim our parental authority. And the third one is to reintroduce a moral framework into our homes and communities. So I talked about all these ideas much more in depth in this episode. And this episode is inspired by the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. The second solo episode that I recorded was What Doesn't Kill You Make You Stronger, finding the balance between safety and challenge. And in this episode, I talked about how while it is good and admirable for today's parents to strive to provide emotional safety for their children and to prevent trauma, I also said that overprotection and loss of parental authority can actually create fragile kids, which we don't want. I talked about balancing between safety and challenge and between our nurturing and our boundaries. I explored the term post-traumatic growth in contrast of post-traumatic stress and how we can strike the right balance between safety and challenge. At the end, I gave a very practical tool of how we can support our children through challenges that they have in their life. And this episode was inspired by the book Bad Therapy by Abigail Shrier, the book The Happiness Hypothesis by Jonathan Haidt, and 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. The next solo episode was You Won't Mess Up Your Kids. And in this episode, I addressed the fear that parents have that they're going to mess up their kids because they're going to cause them trauma. And I emphasized the fact that our kids are not fragile and why us losing our patience with our kids is not the most horrible thing in the world. The next episode is Bring Beauty Back to Our Kids' Lives. And in this episode, I discussed how our society lacks beauty and how our culture has become overly smooth and how we can reintegrate meaning and beauty into our children's lives by rituals, by giving them many opportunities to enter a flow state and to participate in life and with others in a meaningful way. And this episode was inspired by the teachings of John Vervaeke. The next 2 solo episodes are part 1 and part 2 of the same idea. And the one is that therapy can't fix this, the real reason why our kids feel lost. In this episode, I talked about why our society has lost its moral compass. What are the historical political roots of that? And then in the next episode, which is the second part of this episode, I called it Leading Our Kids to a Meaningful Life. And I talked about 4 different ways in which we can bring back meaning into our children's lives. So what's coming up next? Next, I'm going to dive deeper into 2 main topics. The first one is going to be Jewish wisdom. And I'm currently working on a few solo episodes based on, first of all, this book, which is called Omanut Hagba'a, The Art of Elevation by Yechiel Harari. And this is a book that is based on a very important book in the Hasidic movement of Judaism called the Tanya. And the second book is Emun. This book, which was translate into trust, and this book is also inspired by Jewish wisdom in understanding parenting. Another book that I'm reading is called The Way, which is a book that explains Kabbalah concepts. So all these 3 books and others are going to inspire me in writing my next solo episodes about parenting through the Jewish wisdom perspective. Another field of knowledge that I'm really interested in investigating right now is the field of leadership. One of the books that I'm currently reading right now is called Extreme Leadership, and that's a book by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. And this book talks about leadership. It talks about actually leadership in the military, but the principles there can be definitely taken into a personal world and into parenting. So those are the main two fields that I'm starting to investigate right now, and I'm going to create solo episodes for you based on these books. Also, I have a few very exciting interviews coming up. One of them is about raising children in the era of AI. I'm going to talk to Amy Love, who wrote the book Raising Entrepreneurs, Preparing Kids for Success in the Age of AI. I'm having this interview soon, and we're going to talk about what are the skills that our children need in the era of AI. Another very exciting episode that I have coming up is with Kim Rogers, who is known as the Worm Queen. And we're going to talk about parasites in kids. And one of the reasons why I wanted to have this episode is because what I've been realizing in the last year is that many of our children's behaviors are actually not behavioral at all, but they're caused by physical problems that they have in their body, by toxicity, for example, from mold toxicity or from parasites. So I really want to understand that deeply and to share all that information with you guys too. In the next few weeks, I'm going to take a break and I'm not going to publish episodes for the summer break. And I'm going to be back with all that for you. If you want to stay in touch, I'm going to continue sending every week my newsletter. So if you want to sign up for that, it's theparentingwisdom.kit.com/newsletter. You can also follow me on Instagram. I'm still going to be there. My account there is Parenting Wisdom Podcast. You can find me on Facebook as Efrat Amira and follow me through all those platforms. Also exciting news, I'm working on a new website right now, so that should be ready by the fall. And also I'm working on a new program. So I'll keep you all posted about that. Until then, bye for now.